Enjoy this preview of Global Graph Press's Family Christian Bookstore December Book of the Month. This book is available on Kindle, Nook, Kobo, iBooks and more. Click the link to download. Boston, Massachusetts. End of winter, 1874. Elizabeth wished someone would wake her up from this horrible dream. Her world had come crashing down around her, and she did not know what to do or how to face the future. Though grief washed through her, clouding her chubby, round face, she could not bring herself to cry. Her father was dead, and now Gerald Hawkins, his attorney for longer than Elizabeth had been alive, sat across from her in his lavish office, rubbing his palms on the thighs of his trousers with an expression that boded more bad news. Elizabeth Lowell was 19 years old, but anyone looking at her at the moment would have thought she was a decade older. Her face was so lined with age, pain and anxiety. She perched on the edge of the seat and blinked owlishly from behind her large glasses. Gerald said, "Miss Lowell." "Miss Elizabeth. I am so sorry for your loss. Is that why you called me here? You conveyed your condolences at the funeral." "Yes. I did." Gerald had been Elizabeth's father Benjamin's attorney for over 30 years, and having to give the deceased man's daughter more bad news saddened him deeply. Benjamin had been a very astute and wealthy businessman, with a knack for smelling new opportunities and grabbing at them. In a short span of time, the man had become very rich. But all that had changed when his wife died 10 years ago. It was as though the light had been snuffed out of him. He had lost his touch and died with only debts to his name. Not that his 2 daughters knew the latter, yet. "Is this about who will be running my father's factory? Because I cannot be of much service in that." "Surely my father notated such things in his will?" "He did." Elizabeth stared at him. A light sheen of sweat shone on her forehead, and she pulled a handkerchief from her bag, twisting it between her hands. "Mr. Hawkins, you'd best tell me. If your father's death hadn't been so sudden, I'm certain he would have done more to mitigate things. To prepare you." Mr. Lowell took a deep breath. "As it is, I've done everything I can in order to give you. It's only been 2 weeks. But you will have to vacate your home, and there will be an auction for your father's things." "What are you saying? Your father died a pauper, Elizabeth. You and your sister." "He left nothing." "Nothing." Elizabeth took a sharp breath. "Nothing." The elderly man shook his head sadly. "I am sorry that in the last 10 years your father made unwise business decisions and choices, and he got himself into very deep debt. I advised him to sell off a number of the assets that he had in order to settle some of the debts, and in that way he could have been able to at least have something left over to start again. But," Gerald twisted his lips, "you know just how stubborn your father could be." Elizabeth nodded. She knew her father too well. "Then what will happen to us? Do you perhaps have relatives who might take you in, at least for a short while?" But even as Gerald asked, he knew this was a futile suggestion. In all the years that he had been Benjamin Lowell's attorney, the man had not mentioned any relatives from his side or his wife's side. His will had bequeathed everything to his 2 daughters, a will that, right now, was not even worth the paper it was written. "Papa was an only child, and Mama," Elizabeth sighed. She shook her head sadly. "Mama, as you know, was from England, and when she and Papa got married her English family disowned her, for at the time she was betrothed to a lord, or something like that. Her family never forgave her for slighting them by marrying a commoner." "I am sorry, Miss Elizabeth." Gerald truly was sorry, especially in the light of the other news that he was about to relay to the young woman. "Maybe if we earn enough from the sale of his possessions, we can perhaps keep the house? Rent out some rooms so that we can have an income, and then Virginia and I can stay in the servants' section because, of course, we have decided to let the servants go. There is not much work to be done now that Papa is gone. No more entertaining and all." She nodded, forcing a smile. "We can run a boarding house," she said with some hope, but this was soon dashed when she looked at the lawyer. "The house must be sold. It is the only asset that your father had not mortgaged, and the bank is demanding a very hefty sum, and all the other assets that he owned will not cover it. That, together with paying off the servants, will leave you and your sister with a little less than $50. "What?" I am sorry, child, more sorry than you will ever know. Mrs. Hawkins and I can take you in for a while, until you are grounded again, he offered, but Elizabeth shook her head. We will manage. Somehow. Elizabeth stood up and drew her shawl closer, the cold chilling her very bones. It was more than the cold that chilled her. It was a heart that was filled with so much dread and Miss Elizabeth, the bank's representative will be by the house later today to do an inventory of all the items in the house. And you will have to leave the house after that, because I will be handing the keys over to him. Elizabeth sat down again. Are we to lose everything then? Thank you for listening to this audio preview of Montana West's Mail Order Wife. Click on the link to download